What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. But before we get on to the topic for today, I would love it if you did a few things for me. Hit the like button, the subscribe button, the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. And then when you are finished, leave me a comment below. That way I can get back to whatever it is that you had to say. For today's topic, I want to talk about the video game industry, but specifically I want to talk about how the video game industry is predatory and how it operates similarly to televised media. One of the reasons why I really wanted to talk about this topic for today is because I noticed that the whole idea of how the video game industry can be problematic tends to get overlooked when we talk about anti-blackness and we talk about media. But ultimately, the video game industry operates very similarly to televised media. And what that looks like is when we talk about televised media, we're talking about television shows, we're talking about movies, and we're talking about different things that you see on social media. And I think that there are a lot of commonalities, things that are similar between the video game industry and this televised media that I just spoke about. So, for example, one thing that's similar is that there is somewhat of an all-oppressive system that is led by the dominant society and their minions, and they are using this system to control other people with whatever resource and mechanism they're using. In this case, that would be video games. Another thing that I noticed that's very similar to these two things is that there's the presence of anti-blackness in both. Another thing that I noticed that's very similar between these two things is that the way that others interact with this system seems to be very similar to what I see when it comes to media. And what I mean by others, I mean viewers. The way that viewers interact with this system seems to be similar with the way that they interact with the televised media. I used to be a very big video game head, y'all. So like, I think I first started playing video games when I was about 5 years old. And then somewhere around maybe 2017, 2018, the whole video game thing kind of just fell off for me. And there's multiple reasons why. So for me, the video games that I really got into, or my favorite genres, I would say, have always been fighting games and then RPG games. And the reason why I think I really like fighting and RPG games more than any other type of genre is because I like the idea of customization and the idea that you get a lot of different choices. So I've always appealed to games such as like the Pokemon games, the Paper Mario games. I've always liked Mortal Kombat games on the fighting side, Super Smash Brothers. I always looked like games where I could choose the character that I wanted to use or the type of style that I wanted to use whenever I was fighting. And as a matter of fact, I had multiple choices. I like the idea of being able to figure out what works best for me or the things that I like. And I also, want to explore different options when it comes to these types of games. And I also like the idea of strategizing when you're going against an opponent and trying to figure out cool ways to manipulate things to work for you the way that you want them to work for you. And the games that I mentioned, especially games like Pokemon, really gave me that ability to do so. When you have, for those of you all who really weren't Pokemon fans like that, it gave you the ability to catch all these different types of monsters. There's a whole bunch of different types that you could select from. There's a whole bunch of different special abilities that these Pokemon have. There's all types of moves that you could customize these different Pokemon with that you would catch. So for me, it was always cool because it was a good way for me to strategize when I would go against an opponent. And I think fighting games kind of have that similar aesthetic, maybe not so nuanced, but it has a similar aesthetic in the idea that you can figure out a lot of times what type of fighter you like to use. So for example, do you like to use swordsmen? Do you like to use people who can shoot projectiles? Do you like to use people who are just straight up brawlers and they like to kind of go hand to hand combat with folks? So for me, I kind of like the idea of being able to choose what worked best for me. Now, with that being said, I noticed that these types of games tend to take some of the biggest hits in different ways. One way that I think that these two industries I mentioned take a hit is specifically in the RPG industry. I think that they tend to struggle with if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So what I mean by that is if you look at games like Pokemon, it's an RPG game, but they like to kind of do different things because they're so focused on the whole money aspect and the capitalism aspect that they're not realizing how they're actually taking the fun out of what made the games great in the first place. And that's why I said, for me personally, when I look at Pokemon, I like the idea that they had a good slogan, which was "you gotta catch them all," meaning that they were always continuously put Pokemon into this game. What I noticed over time was that they started putting some of the Pokemon in and not all of them, or what they would do is they would put some of them in and then they would have DLC, and then even in the DLC you still wouldn't be able to get them all, but you would be able to get most of them. So that was a problem for me because there's, for those of y'all who do not know, there's 9 generations of Pokemon, and up until generation 7, so 1 through 7, they had this ability where they had the thing where you're able to get all of the Pokemon that were possible to get all up until that point. But past generation 7, they started, kind of being on some bullshit and making it where you can only get some of them. So it's like, gotta catch some of them was their new slogan almost. So the point I'm trying to make though is that it kind of didn't allow you to get everything that you could have gotten in the previous games, therefore taking away one of the core things that was great about their gameplay. So Pokemon Sword and Shield, for those of you all who are Pokemon heads, was the start of this bullshit, as I just said. Now when it comes to and another RPG game I want to bring up real quick is like the Paper Mario series. Again, it's a if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing. You had the first 2 games, arguably 3 games that were pretty good or excellent, and then it just seemed like ever since then the games that they made basically were kind of shitty for the Paper Mario series, that is. And there's new developers who were involved, and there's a lot of other stuff that was kind of going on as well too, and they're trying new things and whatnot, and it's just really not the same. And you're really essentially playing a similar series, like what I would call a continuation from the previous series, but you're paying a higher price even in some cases than you may have done in the past. So from my perspective, I think that there's a if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing that's going on with the RPG series. With the fighting games, they also attack this genre heavy because you have games where back in the day you used to have a set of fighters that would be in a game, and then you would have to unlock the other fighters as well. So in other words, you had a set of maybe like 10 fighters, and there may have been like 3 or 4 unlockables, that you were able to get if you beat the game or you did certain things. And we went used to back in the day, we would go online and we would look up how to unlock this character and that type of thing, and get advice from other people who basically had done it before and were given instructionals, and then we would do it ourselves. But now what they like to do is they like to have a bunch of characters in the game, and then they like to have a story mode and all this other stuff, which is cool, but a lot of it feels really incomplete. It feels like they only did like 80% of the game. And then what they like to do is say, we have additional characters that you can get in their DLC, and then you're paying $5 a damn character, so instead of you being able to, toil through the game and do the shit that we did back in the day and unlock it, they are now charging you DLC to get, a pack of characters in that DLC package. So now I'm shifting from just talking about characters to the whole package. It could be like $25 or $35 or $30, which is absurd because now this game, which was probably $59.99 or $69.99, is now probably going to be closing in on somewhere between $90 to $100 when and figure in tax and all this other stuff. So I think my point with all this is that they really switched up some things, and it was all in the name of them trying to get as much money off the backs of their consumers as possible. I'll be real with y'all. What would work for me when it comes to the video game industry is if we could have this thing where you know, if even if it was that serious and they had to put in new characters, so new DLC, and you know they wanted to charge more, just charge more for the game up front. I'll pay the $89.99 or the $99.99 or whatever it is to have a fully well done game with all the characters and all the bells and whistles and the excitement of me being able to have this game and unlock different things and different modes, instead of me paying for those things and then me automatically being able to use it. So now I'm coming out of pocket more money because you didn't finish the fucking game. And the other thing too is, and this is the part that kills me about these video game fools, a lot of them love to say, well, we changed it up because you know, we have spectacular graphics, and you know, all of our developers work very hard to provide games with great graphics in them, and so that it's stellar, and you can watch it on 4D vision and 8010 vision. It's spectacular, like it's nothing we've seen before. Meanwhile, these damn graphics haven't changed anywhere from between 2017 to now. Like, come on, man. And let me be real with y'all. I'm not trying to shit on video game developers. As a matter of fact, my very best friend is a video game developer, and he's really doing his thing. So shout out to him. But the point I'm trying to make is that video game developers, of course, should be paid for the work that they do, meaning that there should be a bigger charge if there is going to be better quality in a game. But what I'm saying is that the video game industry should charge more if it's that serious, and then have a bunch of loaded content into this game, and then people just pay that price. But instead what they want to do is they want to continuously make money, so they'll just say, you know, we'll give you most of the game, so we'll give you 85% of the game, you pay for the other 15% so you can unlock extra story modes, or you can unlock extra characters and that type of thing, and you do it you know, step by step, because you already paid for the game, but now you're going to pay for extra things as well too. So, you know, we live in this world now where everything is marketed. Every single fucking thing is marketed. So they feel that this is a good, you know, marketing strategy for them to make money off of merchandise and the idea of luster and the idea that this thing that they've created is new. So they're really profiting off of that. And they're also, you know, profiting off the fact that, you know, there are people who are hardcore fans who will pay for all of these things because they think it's cool in that moment, when, let's be real, some years later, nobody is going to be thinking about it. And they also understand this as well too. So when it comes to the video game industry and what they're doing, I don't really support that. The other thing that I don't support, and I noticed this especially with the fighting games, because this is somewhat of a grudge that I have, like a personal gripe, and y'all can disagree if you want. I don't really care. Point is that I noticed that with fighting games, they will have one game where they make an ultimate roster. Like, so they have a game where, like, all the fighters that you could have imagined being in this particular game, like a Super Smash Brothers, for example. They have all the possible fighters that you could even imagine being in this game, like being all under one, I guess, roof. You know, you're able to use them, and it just gives you a wide variety, like I said. I hate when they create new games that are kind of different variations of that particular fighting game, or even a continuation, and they don't keep that exact same roster. So for example, if you had a game roster that had like 20 characters that you're like blown away by the fact that all these damn characters are all in the same place, and then in the next game they don't stay with those 20 and add on to it, they take some of them out and then they put some new ones in. So now it has you doing a few things. It has you thinking, okay, so did you do this because of the fact that you need to make money off of this series? So you just made a game that was somewhat similar to this original one, but you just did not have the time to put all of them in there. So you put some of them in there while also putting new people in there, which now makes me as a gamer speculate as to what would it have been like if these characters you discluded all like were able to interact with the characters that you just put into this new game. So it kind of brings that whole idea of, damn, we know that you're creating this game not because you want to create a really well done continuation, but because you literally want to continue to make money off of this particular series. So you're making something that's similar, that's not all the way what it should be. I think a better example of this particular thing where you see this type of concept I talked about is like in the Dragon Ball Z series, because you have like the Budokai Tenkaichi 3 series, where this was like one of the best fighting games that has ever been made because of gameplay and also because of like them having such a fully loaded roster. But then you see some of the games they came out with after that, like the Raging Blast games, like the Dragon Ball Fighter Z games and things like that. And then all of a sudden it's like there's better graphics, as I talked about, and it's kind of updated or whatever the fuck they want to say, but then it doesn't have that same roster of 160 plus characters that it did in the Budokai Tenkaichi 3 series. So they're doing this basically to just continue to put out games because they want to continue to make money, not games that are good quality. And what they'll do is they'll throw a lot of luster and this whole idea of it being new out there, and then consumers are basically going to buy it as a result. Another thing that I noticed too is that, and this kind of goes into that territory of what I said, where the video game industry is similar to the televised media industry in the idea that the way that it impacts the consumers is very similar. I find that when it comes to a lot of the issues in both of these mediums, that it's kind of balanced differently in some places. I find that the way that the consumers react is about the same. The control that's in the video game industry is much greater, and the predatoriness, the anti-blackness in the media industry is much greater. So in other words, you have like somewhat of a similar concept, but the scales are kind of like balanced a little bit differently. Video game industry being one that has better control than media, because there's a lot more avenues somebody can go when it comes to media, as far as like pitching their content and pitching like what they created to a producer. There's more options for that, or potential options is what I mean. Whereas in the video game industry, you have just a handful of major companies, and then you have a bunch of like indies kind of that nobody or most people don't really know about or aware of, especially if you're not a big video game head. But usually it's like you got Nintendo, you got like Sony, you got Microsoft and things like that, and those are like the big wigs. Whereas there's a lot of different producers and production studios and that type of thing when it comes to the media industry. But when it comes to the control, that's why I would say that it's better with video games as far as like the dominant society goes, because they can just do whatever the hell they want, because you're at the mercy of them creating something that you want to play, but it's only 3 of them that you can go to. So if one pisses you off, you only got 2 more options, and chances are they're all going to kind of do similar things, and they are doing similar things. When it comes to the media industry, like televised media, there's so many different production studios, so many different companies doing different things. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still very rampant. It's very, 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 very rampant, but it's not quite as bad because of like the level of options that you have and things that you could potentially do. Now, again, the anti-blackness is worse on the televised media side, because if you look at televised media, the thing that I typically see is that there's a lot of anti-black images in things that are related to cartoons and things that are related to like real life, like biopics and shows like sitcoms, dramas, thrillers. There's anti-blackness all throughout all of that. When it comes to the video game industry, it happens. So I ain't trying to say it doesn't happen, but it's a little bit more sly and infrequent, and you really, really, really got to look out for it, because it happens, but it doesn't happen quite as much. But again, the big thing that is the same between the two of these different mediums is that the way that it impacts the consumers is pretty much about the same. So let me explain what I mean by that. I noticed that the consumers of televised media and the consumers of the video game industry are a bunch of saps. These are a bunch of dopes who just give into shit and will literally side with these individuals who are clearly predatory. They don't want to do anything about it. They just want to be able to enjoy a completely great video game, and they don't want to complain, and they're actually mad at anybody else who actually brings up criticism of the product that's out there. So in other words, it's always like it's almost like I would like to say that there's polarizing opinions that maybe drown out the fact that we're trying to talk about the issues. But ultimately, I think that what's happening is you have, people who are not trying to really rock the boat. They don't really see a reason to. They don't really see it as a big deal. They see it as a thing of, I play video games. I'm here to enjoy a good one. So I don't really care about all the ins and outs. If I just need to pay the price to play the game, then that's what I'm going to do. If I need to just, drop, another $30 for the DLC, that's what I'm going to do. At least they gave us something. They have that type of mentality. And the same is with like movies and things like that and television shows. It's a thing of, it was a good show, despite this, so I don't get the complaints, or it's just not that serious, or it's just not that deep. So people really get into that. And y'all know this about me by now. I fucking hate that mentality. I hate that mentality because shit never gets done because you have a bunch of bitch ass people who do not know how to stand up and solve problems. They can't stand up to things that they either know are wrong or are not trying to see the error of the things that are happening before them. So that's part of the problem. And so I had to separate that and say, okay, what can black people do to make things better for themselves? And that's why I tell black people, when it comes to televised media, you need to create your own thing. And then, we need to have people who are not just creators of their own television shows, movies, comics, that type of thing. We also need to have producers who are black and who are on code, who are also going to kind of create their own thing and then help other black people who want to have their content, turn into bigger productions. So we need that on that side. So my point here is that the same thing needs to happen for the video game industry. You need video game developers. You need people who are going to band together to create their own type of company. Black owned is what I mean by that. And here's where this is going to be especially important. I noticed that the anti-blackness, like I said, tends to not really get talked about too much in the video game industry, but it is certainly prevalent. I have seen it in many instances. Matter of fact, in one of y'all's favorite games is where I've seen it. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, that is. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has a lot of anti-blackness, and I'll kind of kick a few things at you so you can kind of, understand what was happening there. So one thing that happened in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is they had this mode in there called World of Light. So as you all know, Super Smash Bros. is a fighting game that has a compilation of Nintendo characters and other third-party characters as well too, and other ones that are somewhat affiliated with Nintendo, or they got the green light to put in the damn game. And so in World of Light, they have like this story mode where you interact with these different characters on this path, and the characters come from these different game series. And so they don't actually have you, they have it where like you're fighting I think for lack of better words, the spirits of these characters. So in other words, they'll tell you which character that you're fighting, but then they'll represent them by some character that is already on the roster. So let me give you an example of something that they did. They took the character called Sandman, and he is the main villain of the Punch-Out series. Sandman is a foundational black American male in his 30s. He's very muscular, and he is, again, the villain of the series. And so there's a path where you're supposed to go and fight Sandman, but he's represented by a character that's currently on the roster because Sandman himself is not a character. And so when you go to fight Sandman, the character that represents him is Donkey Kong. So that means that they made the executive decision to represent Sandman, a foundational black American male, by a gigantic gorilla in Donkey Kong. Do you understand the racism of associating these two? And then I thought about this and I said, let's see if this is really a coincidence, because this is now at accident mode. Remember I told you about the anti-black identification rubric that I have? First time is an accident, second time is a coincidence, third time is a pattern in practice. So here we go. We got one time right there. Second thing that I saw was that the character DJ, who was in a fighting game, was represented by Diddy Kong on the path. So now you have another black male character, DJ, who is a fighting character, and he is represented by a monkey, Diddy Kong, who is the nephew of Donkey Kong. I believe he's the nephew. Anyway, So that's the second instance. The next instance is Sakurai, the creator of Super Smash Brothers, had a picture of the day back in September of 2021. And in his picture of the day, he had a picture of Mario, who has like this machine called Flood, where he can actually like super soak somebody. Like it's almost like you're hosing them down. And he was hosing down this character named Rodin, who was in the Bayonetta series, and Rodin is black. And then you had Peach, who kind of had this dismissive Princess Peach, the kind of blonde hair white chick, who is the I guess you can say she's a love interest of the Mario series, was sitting there and she was kind of turning a blind eye to it in the picture. So, and by the way, when I say that this hose picture where Mario was hosing down Rodin, I'm referring to how it closely relates to how blacks were getting hosed down by the white supremacists during the civil rights movement. So that's why I said that this image was clearly to mimic what happened during that time period, which is offensive to foundational black Americans, how it's being rehashed in a picture as a whole picture of the month thing. Look at all of these different instances. You can see that there is a pattern of anti-blackness and them trying to be sly about it. Because a lot of people would then go back and they would say, well, what else could we do? Because as a matter of fact, my friend that I told you about, he actually had a friend who was working, because they both used to work for Nintendo. He had a friend and they were speaking to some of the higher ups about that, about like that being, you know, racist. And so then he said, what's up with that? And some of the people who he spoke to were basically saying, you know, what else, you know, do you expect us to do? And it's like, are you for real? He could have been Lil Mac with a different skin. He could have been like an actual character himself, or you could have just not placed this dude in the fucking game if that was the case. You could have done anything, but you just chose to represent a black person as a damn monkey twice in the game. The other thing that they did too was there's a character who was supposed to be like a bandit, that type of thing, supposed to be a thief, and he was represented by a this character named Villager, who was supposed to be from Animal Crossing, and Villager was black. So now, or this villager that they had was black. The skin they had was a black villager. So now this black villager was being represented by a character who was a thief. So that's like 4 instances, y'all. There's no way that they did this by accident. Absolutely no way. So, and this is what I mean. This little slick shit goes on all the time. And even if you want to just not look at the stuff that's really blatant, let's look at the things that are very, very minute. Have you noticed that in the video game industry, when it comes to the cartoony characters, you don't see a lot of black ones? You don't see a black Mario. You don't see a black Link. You don't see a black Roy from Fire Emblem. You don't see a black Samus Aran. You don't see black characters that are in these popularized games where they have a cartoony type of look. You don't see that type of thing at all. Now you do have maybe like a lot of black characters who are in fighting games, and I noticed that too. A lot of black characters, if they are there, they're in fighting games more than anything else, and that's just really all they do. But I think the point I was trying to make here is that they clearly are not trying to have black representation in the video game industry. So it is our job as black people, especially foundational black Americans, to make our presence known. And that's why it's important for us to literally have our own ideas and be able to pitch them to video game developers who are also on code in black as well too. We also need to, again, if we're not a video game developer or somebody who even likes to play video games, be the supporter of one. I know a lot of y'all, a lot of y'all who are out there who are listening to this video, y'all got kids who, you know, during Christmas they want a damn Xbox and they want a damn PlayStation. I already know. So like, you need to be a supporter as well too, especially if you're black. You need to be a supporter of that type of movement, because eventually they're probably going to be like gamers, especially if you have like a black boy who, like, you know, grows up playing them and whatnot. You know, I know y'all are watching this and y'all understand what I'm saying. So yeah, the video game industry is definitely one that has a lot of similarities to what we see from the televised media. All right, y'all, that's all I got for this topic, but I'm sure I'm going to have a lot more to talk about and a lot more to say, so make sure that y'all stay tuned. Other than that, I will talk to y'all later. Peace.